With the patterns applied, I'd like to refine the card and add some details to the grass, as well as add some landmarks to the map. So in this video, we'll add those landmarks and add some detail to them as well. Now, we already have the pattern swatch applied to the grassy area of our traffic circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on that. And I like the way that looks, but I think it would look even better if I had a little bit more depth to it. So I'm going to select this object, and I'm going to open up my appearance panel. And we can see that we have the pattern swatch applied to the fill, and there's no stroke on this path. So again, in the appearance panel, we're targeting the path right now. Now down at the bottom, I'm going to click on the Add New Fill button. And now you'll see that I have a second fill that I currently have selected. So right now, both of the fills have the pattern swatch applied. But I'm going to make an adjustment here. I'm going to come up here and open my gradient panel. And within the gradient panel, if I click on the type drop-down menu, I can add a linear gradient, which is basically, left to right or top to bottom. Or I can also add a radial gradient. And in this example, I think I want to add a radial gradient. I think that makes more sense. Now, in the gradient panel, what's happening here is we have what's called the gradient ramp, or the gradient slider, and below we have two gradient stops. Okay, so these are the stops that control what the gradient looks like. So in this case, it's going from white to black, very basic, and you can drag these stops to control the distance that the gradient travels from and to. So if you want a more abrupt gradient, you can make the transition shorter, and if you want a more subtle gradient, you can make it wider. And then this guy here allows you to choose the transition point. So if you want more black than white, you can drag this slider to the left, and if you want more white than black, you can drag it to the right. So whatever makes sense for you. Now, if you click in between these two stops, you can add another one. And whenever you double click on a gradient stop, you can pick another color to apply to that stop. In addition, you can change the opacity of an individual stop. And that's going to allow whatever's behind it to show through only on that stop. You can see the checkerboard pattern here where that stop is transparent, but then it's transitioning to opaque. Now, I really just want a white to black gradient, so I'm going to click on this stop and drag down to remove that stop from my gradient. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my transparency panel. So if I click on my transparency panel, right now this is a completely opaque gradient. What I'm going to do is in the blend mode dropdown, I'm going to change the blend mode to multiply, which is one of the more common blending modes that you can use. And it's really versatile because it basically multiplies the two colors together and often gives you a really nice look to it. Now, it's a little intense, so I'm going to reduce the overall opacity of that to just make it a little more subtle. So I'll go with about 80%, and I think that looks pretty good. That's what I was going for. Now, I would also like to apply the same appearance to this object over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this object, and we're going to take advantage of the eyedropper tool. Now, what you'll want to do is double click on the eyedropper to control what the eyedropper is going to pick up and apply. Now, typically by default, the appearance is not enabled. But in my case, and in our case here, I want it to pick up the appearance. So make sure that appearance is enabled for both picks up and applies. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now with this object selected, I can use my eyedropper and click on this object, and it's going to apply the same appearance to the grassy area up here in the upper right. Now keep in mind, I also could achieve this result by creating a graphic style of the grassy area. And if I wanted to do that, I could just drag this over here and drop it, and then I could select this object and apply the same graphic style to it as well. And what that would do for me is if I ever modified that graphic style, all of the grassy areas would update as well. Now, one last thing I'm going to do, in the middle of this grassy area of the traffic circle, we have an area that we need to be a water area. So I'm going to use my Blob Brush tool, and you'll probably have to click and hold on your paintbrush tool to grab that. And interestingly enough, the Blob Brush tool creates a closed shape, unlike the regular brush tool, which creates an open path. And what I want to do here is I'm going to set my fill color to none, and then I'm going to click on my stroke color, and I want to apply a stroke color to the Blob Brush tool because that's the color that's used when the Blob Brush creates a shape. So I'm just going to click in this area down here. In the panel menu here, I'll go to CMYK, and I'm just going to change the value to like 100% cyan and then 0 for everything else. And that's going to become our like blue watercolor. Maybe I'll add a little bit of magenta to make it a little bit of a darker blue. That looks pretty good. And then with the Blob Brush tool, you can use the left and right bracket keys on your keyboard to make your brush bigger or smaller. So I'm going to go with about that size. And essentially what I want to do is just kind of draw a shape here. So I'm just going to kind of draw kind of like a water shape in here. Use your imagination. And then I'll just fill in this area. And what you're going to find is that when I let go, it's going to create a closed shape. Now, once you've drawn that, you can kind of extend it by simply kind of painting over it. And that'll allow you to add even more. And you're just kind of adding to that overall shape. So I think that looks pretty good. Now, if you wanted to smooth this out a little bit, we can click on it with our selection tool. Actually, let's use the direct selection tool so we can see the anchor points. And in previous videos, we used our smooth tool to kind of smooth this out. But I want to show you, you can also go to the object menu under path and choose simplify. And what this allows you to do in your curve precision, if you drag to the left, you're going to get a very, very different shape. As you can see, the precision is like 0. But the higher the precision, the more accurately it'll re-render your shape. And you'll notice that if I turn the preview on and off, that the simplify command is reducing the number of anchor points on that path. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And let's go ahead and zoom out on our card. And I really think this is coming along, and I like how this is proceeding. So hopefully you enjoyed learning about some new tools and techniques for creating these landmark elements.